Okay, my name is Larry McGlynn, and you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHMWPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by Jack O'Hara, president of the Greater Bustleton Civic League, to discuss the ongoing issues with the old Bud plant site. There's some updates here.
hmm
Lance Haver will report on the water rate increase, and Denise Clay-Murray will share her thoughts on the recent municipal contract settlements. Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. We're in the studio tonight.
hmm
Lance Haver is going to join us,
Yes.
and Vanessa Maria Graber is going to join us.
hmm
So it's going to be a full house here in studio.
Yeah. It's one of those rare occasions where you have the entire hall monitor crew in one place and there's no dogs, no cats, none of that stuff. Just us.
Not intentionally, anyway.
Well, we could bring a dog or a cat in here, but I don't know if that would work.
I don't think that's allowed. But so what we're going to do is we're going to start with Jack O'Hara telling us a little bit about what's going on. We talked to Jack a while ago
hmm
about the ongoing issues they had there. At one point, it was slated to be a UPS distribution center right in the middle of a neighborhood, and the RCO fought that, and they had some issues with that. And Jack's going to get us caught up on that. Tell us a little bit about how we got to the situation. So here's our interview with Jack O'Hara. All right, Jack, thank you so much for joining us.
Larry, thank you.
So tell us a little bit about the RCO and what you do in Bustleton.
So
Something about
the RCO, the Registered Community Organization in Northeast Philadelphia, we're in the Bustleton section, and we are called the Greater Bustleton Civic League. And it's been in existence for 80 plus years. I've been the head of it for about 12. So it's been around a long time, and it does have a history of getting involved in zoning issues often. It has a pretty good track record legacy of that. So community involvement is something I inherited, and people do show up at our meetings and regularly reach out to us. So it's I was handed something pretty nice, a nice organization. So go ahead, Larry.
Well, so the first time we spoke was a
Mhm.
while ago. Remind people what was happening and
Sure.
where are we now in that process?
Sure. Back in 2018, it was March of 2018, there was an article in the Inquirer describing a new project on this open parcel of land in Northeast Philadelphia, in Bustleton, 130 acres. So it was a substantial piece of property. We didn't know anything about it. We didn't get any warning or were asked about it, but we read an article in the Inquirer saying that a 1.1 million square foot warehouse was going to be built on this parcel.
Now,
So,
it's unusual for you not to get some kind of warning about that.
yes, yes. They applied for permits. They got their permits right away. And yes, normally there would be a request for variances or a lot of, ground setting for a large project like this. So we did not get notification from the state, from our elected officials. We literally read it in the Inquirer. So that generated a lot of interest from the community. The RCO went out in search of what the plans are, how big it's going to be, who the tenant is going to be. And that was pretty hard to nail down for a very long time. You know, our elected officials told us they didn't know anything about it. Yeah. So so this had to evolve. It evolved slowly. So one of the residents in Bustleton literally built a very large warehouse for Acme Markets. The gentleman is now deceased, but he was very helpful to me early on in understanding what the scope of a warehouse this size would be and the impact it would have on a surrounding community. So he kind of lit a fire under me and find out this, find out that, find out this. So we started piecing together information, which like I said, it was very hard to accumulate, put all together. We finally got the plan. None of it came from the city or any department in the city. It was we had to, continually ask for it. And then once we got our hands on it, I'm not an engineer or a land planner, but it really looked excessive to a layman. And so I passed it around. I had other people look at it, and sure enough, they all said that this is pretty substantial for this parcel that is literally surrounded by residential. It's not sitting on a highway, it's not sitting on an interstate. It is surrounded by residential neighborhoods. And it's a 2-mile drive to the first artery, which is Route 1, Roosevelt Boulevard. So it was tucked into our community. And like I said, we had to piece together this story. And, once we got our hands on it, we thought it was, ill-suited. It was overuse of the parcel for what was being described to us. We asked more questions. They did a presentation, and everyone was convinced that this was not suitable for this parcel, considering what was around it and the impact it would have. The project was smooth sailing from the start for the applicant, for the developer. They were told they didn't require any variances. They didn't need to get in front of the community for approval of anything. So we questioned that. Eventually, they did get in front of the Civic Design Review group a couple times. And that was really the only chance the community had to get a good understanding of the scale and the scope of this thing. So once we really understood it, we were compelled. It's like we had to do something, and we put the vote out to membership. Like, listen, this is bad. We think it's bad. We would like to appeal it, and I had to ask, the community, the RCO group membership, if we could spend money to appeal this, and it was approved. So the group, our RCO, approved it. We had to hire a traffic engineer. We hired a land planner, professionals, credited professionals that work for the city in many on many projects. So they were well-known individuals, and they confirmed with us. They were like, yeah, this is bigger than they think it should be, and they felt that a variance was needed for a couple things. We felt that there wasn't a lot of scrutiny given to this project. So we started the appeal, and we got in front of the zoning board of adjustment. Years later, we finally got in front of the zoning board of adjustment after we did a lot of groundwork. And I'm telling you, it was one of the better parts of the story. It was a real community effort. There were individuals with different backgrounds lending me information that they were familiar with, and it all was confirmation. Like, this is ill-suited for here. We weren't against development of this parcel. We weren't against warehouses. We weren't against UPS. It was just like this was dramatic. A 1.1 million square feet with all the traffic and trucks and things like that would go with it. We had our feelings confirmed by these professionals. So we kind of got all of our ducks in a row, and we were ready to, take it to court or, get in front of the zoning board of adjustment. That was the first step. And the zoning board of adjustment heard a couple hours of it, and then, put the kibosh on it. That's it, and we later learned that it was dismissed. Our appeal of this project was dismissed. We had witnesses waiting online. We had all these documents that were written up to support our position of opposition. So it was a debate we felt we were very prepared to have, and we had the information to make our point. And
Now, but why did they overturn that the appeal? What was their rationale for that?
It the rationale, the wording, I forget, Larry, but it was, it wasn't needed. It wasn't required. One of their positions was that this was um, a project by right, meaning that no variances were needed, and they were sticking to that position. That was actually one of the points we wanted to debate in our appeal. We wanted to prove that the parcel is zoned I2, industrial 2, and industrial categories are small, medium, large, 1, 2, and 3. And we felt by no means is this a medium-sized industrial. This is a large project with a lot of activity coming out of it. And at the very least, it should be upgraded to an I3 or higher if there was a category. So that was one of their positions. This is by right. We don't need to do any of this. And it ended after a very short hearing, and we got a notice a couple days later that they're dismissing our appeal. So we got kicked out of there. We then appealed it in Common Pleas Court. Judge Coyle then there agreed with the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and without ever hearing, our argument, reading all of the documentation and support that we had, the Judge Coyle also dismissed it. We appealed that ruling. We got in front of the Commonwealth Court, and we made our case again, and we submitted all of our material, and that's a 3-judge panel on the Commonwealth Court. And we tried to make our case. The applicant and their tenant, UPS, were defending that. And the 3-judge panel dismissed it with one dissenting judge's opinion, which was a mirror of our position. So at that point, we felt justified. It was like, okay, so someone at that level understands what we see as wrong, and we would like to get in front of, a deciding body, to challenge what was approved, and that got dismissed. But like I said, the dissenting judge had wrote her opinion, and it was very convincing. And like I said, it was a mirror of what we felt. So now we're at the Commonwealth Court level, dismissed, and there was a lot of discussion. These cases cost a lot of money to pursue. We felt we had very good reasoning on why this was ill-suited. And we really wanted to have that discussion. We wanted to show everyone why, support for this position of opposition. So we then made the decision to appeal it to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which was quite a step, a lot of discussion, and it's costly to do all this. But we felt we had a very, very good argument from the lack of variances and the speed of permits that were issued, traffic, the environmental issues that actually, that was one topic that we didn't have the funds to pursue, but environmental issues, very, very important, but we were restricted to make that case. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court read, it wasn't a court hearing, but they read our petition of why we wanted to have this overruled, and they dismissed it. A very important point I want to make, Larry, is that this whole trip through the courts had nothing to do with the underlying zoning issues that we wanted to, review. And, we were able to support our opinion. We wanted to hear that.
Well, does anybody from the courts ever say why you couldn't bring your evidence to bear?
It is in one sentences. It was like this was addressed at the lower level, and no, they don't need to hear your witnesses and evidence. Yes, it it is so shallow, Larry. It has a lot of us, many scratching their heads, and a lot of individuals that are much more schooled in this area than I am. They they're left dumbfounded. Like, how could you not be allowed? The the follow-up to that is it does sort of set a precedent for future cases.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know the legal reasoning for it, but it basically means that a zoning board is not obligated to hear witnesses and supporting evidence, which we felt was not the precedent that the state wanted to set. But that is, basically what was ruled on. Whether we can present evidence and witnesses. That was it. It was never under the underlying zoning issues that we wanted to debate.
I'm no lawyer, but that's
Yes,
the point of the courts, to hear evidence.
Larry, you're in a long line of people that are saying the exact same thing. My feeling is I think this will be questioned in the future, but the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruling that came down 2 weeks ago said that it was this was addressed, and no, they don't have to hear anymore.
Uh,
Yes,
I don't understand that at all.
Larry, that's the reaction of many.
Yeah. All right. I'd like to bring you Denise Clay-Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Hi, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Where does the project stand now? I mean, the community has pretty much let people know they do not want this here. Where is what's the status of the project now?
We don't know exactly where it stands. UPS was the tenant that was going to move into this parcel. There's the developer owner is a company, CDC, Commercial Development Corporation in St. Louis. So they're the owner. Uh, their tenant was UPS, and that was years ago. So today, the landscape has changed in a lot of different ways. Package delivery industry is still thought of as a growth industry, but it's in the paper. UPS is laying off 20,000 employees. They're offering early retirement for many of their employees. They're closing 70 some facilities. They are closing facilities that they lease and own. So I think, a lot of warehousing in and around Philadelphia, a lot of warehousing has been built. So it's a supply and demand issue. We think, again, this is just from our own industry research, it's not as attractive to build a large facility like this, especially when demand is changing, a demand for warehousing. And then UPS also, their own business. Amazon was a big customer of theirs, one of their biggest, and they're doing a whole lot less work with Amazon. So it's a kind of a reorganization within UPS. The over supply of warehousing, a lot of factors are in play at this point in time, 2025. That's what exists today. That didn't exist back in 2018 and 17 when these permits were issued. And I think the market looked a little bit better for the construction of large warehousing.
So I guess this plot of land is sitting empty right now.
Yes.
Has anyone thought of what they want to do with it, since obviously this warehouse isn't going to come to pass? You have this piece of empty land. Has anyone talked about what they want to do with it?
No, Denise, we're not having discussions with the owner over that. We really don't know. I mean, it's a very good question. A lot of people ask me that, what's going to happen? We really don't know. The way I understand it is that the permits that they were given by license and inspection are still good. So they exist, those permits exist for that parcel to build that facility. Whether UPS is a tenant or not is unknown. It could be a different tenant. But my understanding is that nothing has changed as far as that goes. So our opposition, our opposition was never against UPS. Our opposition was against the scale of this project and the impact it was going to have on the Bustleton community, the surrounding community, Lower Moreland, uh, other sections of Philadelphia, Somerton section above us, north of us. So yeah, it's going to have a large impact, in that surrounding, the entire surrounding area.
Now, if I guess my question is, you all are the RCO there and
Yes.
you're active. Why didn't they bring you into this process at the very beginning? So maybe there wouldn't have been all of this transaction in court.
Denise, we don't know that. There's a lot of things I could complain about. The lack of information given to us from the beginning it was just a wrestling match to get our hands on. And also, I want to point out that the businesses, large businesses up there, Sameyer Steel and um, the construction company that's right next door to them. These are large businesses that have been there for generations. They also were not informed. They also are in our corner opposing this. It's going to be more harmful to their existing businesses than I think anyone imagined. So why no one brought us into it? I don't know. When we appealed these permits, excuse me, we didn't file a lawsuit. We didn't ask for an injunction to stop construction. We were appealing, issued permits. The business, the owner, it was a business decision not to go forward with the construction of it. So we didn't halt a project. We were appealing. We wanted to learn more about permits that were issued, and we felt we had the information to support our position of opposition to it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking some time out to talk to us today. I'm going to give you back to Lawrence McGlynn, our co-host, and you're listening to Philadelphia Hall Monitor on 106.5 FM.
All right. Thank you, Denise.
All right, Denise.
Jack, are there any next steps now for the RCO regarding this?
Next steps, that we are there's a couple. Well, no. Let me a quick no. Are there things I'm hoping for? Yes, but there's nothing solid that we can hook our wagon onto. We are waiting to hear what the plans are. We kind of think the timing is right. It's a large parcel. The Civic Design Review actually said, the Civic Design Review thought committee, they thought it was, overuse of that parcel, and they suggested at the hearing that mixed use might have been a better, you know, uh, solution for this. So we're hoping that at some point this is, I mean, it is 7 years old, eight-year-old project. We feel that, a lot of that data should be re-examined. I mean, in 8 years, everything has changed. This area is more congested. There's more warehousing. There's a whole lot of new warehousing on Route 1, Roosevelt Boulevard. So the surrounding area has changed dramatically. People have moved in and people have moved out. So what we're hoping for is that maybe the timing is right to reconsider what they want to do with this, what the owner wants to do with this, and what the city. I mean, the city has some influence over this and can make suggestions, and we're hoping someone in city council or someone may step forward and recommend a re-examination of it. Uh, I'm not in that business. I don't know what works. People have asked me, well, what do you want there? It's like, that's not my area of expertise. And, I'm not going to run down that hole. But, these large projects usually bring in land planners and that make suggestions what would be accommodating to the existing community and what would work there. So I'm hoping involvement from the city occurs and the project gets re-examined, and I really hope the owner of the projects also sees that it might not be the best fit for a large surrounding residential business community, and that something less might be more profitable and attractive to them.
How can people learn more about the Greater Bustleton Civic League, and how can they reach out to you?
We have a website. Actually, we're in the middle of redoing our website, but it's GBCL Online, Greater Bustleton Civic League, GBCL Online is the existing. And then we have a Facebook page, Greater Bustleton Civic League, with some information on it. It's a volunteer group, and we're always short of volunteers to keep those sites looking as best they can. But right now, we're in the process of building a new website, so hopefully that will be out there soon.
All right, Jack O'Hara, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure thing, Larry. Thank you, and thank you, Denise. Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we'd like to thank Jack O'Hara for joining us on the program. And now they're both in the same shot, so I'm going to introduce them both. Vanessa Maria Graber is here. Vanessa, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great, thanks.
And Lance Haver, consumer reporter, how are you?
I'm fine. Upset is normal. That seems to be what's going on in the new age.
Yeah, I know. Everything's a waking nightmare. So let's start with Vanessa. You're going to tell us a little bit about the federal budget and the rescission process.
Yeah, I think my mic is on.
Okay.
Okay. Well, the Senate is one step closer to approving President Trump's plan to claw back funding, over $9 billion of funding from both public media and USAID in a process what's known as rescission. Now, both of these programs, funding has been appropriated by Congress. So they already passed laws, right, to fund USAID and public media. And so this rescission process is not typical. And even as we talked about before, CPB has been funded for 2 years, right? So that funding request was approved last year for fiscal year 25 and 26. And so if more than $1 billion is rescinded or taken away from them, that is really going to impact public media stations around the country in a significant way. And so this is a multi-step process. It's interesting because we're always learning about how the federal government works and how they use these rules and the parliamentarian to either delay votes or speed things up. So yesterday, senators voted 51-50 on 2 procedural hurdles the package needed to overcome. This now, fast forwards this process, and Vice President J.D. Vance was the tiebreaker in that. So now the Senate has until Friday to finalize any other amendments or changes to the bill. And what we know now is they don't have enough votes, right? And so they're employing a number of delay tactics in order to finish up those negotiations. And as we've seen before, there is an incredible amount of pressure from the president and his administration to make Republican senators who maybe are not in favor of doing this pass the bill, or else they will face consequences later. And what many call a loyalty test, right? We're starting to see that too with like this Jeffrey Epstein fiasco that's happening, right? That's causing a lot of uproar, and then the president again asking people to drop it and move on. And a lot of people aren't doing that. So there's about 5 to 6 Republican senators who are still unsure of it. There's 2 main sticking points. One of them, of course, is wanting to make sure that rural public media stations have funding, because some stations in rural areas have a large percentage of their funding comes from CPB, like anywhere from 60 to 75%. And given all of these natural disasters, right, like we just saw what happened in New Jersey, in Plainfield, New Jersey, these floods, in Texas and New Mexico, right, the number of floods is increasing regularly. And this defunding of the National, Oceanic Atmospheric Service, it really does impact communities' ability to warn people about floods and other natural disasters. And I think we're going to see an investigation into what exactly happened in Texas and how those layoffs impacted the ability for emergency personnel to alert those folks. So that's not just a concern in rural areas, it is a concern everywhere. But, these Republicans are particularly concerned about rural stations in their state. And so they're looking at specifically at tribal stations. Now, it's just a couple $1 million that they're trying to save out of $1 billion. So it's not really going to do much. And I find it interesting, like that's, the only stations that they care about. Because in a state like Alaska, for example, many of the public media stations there will probably have to go off the air and transfer or sell the licenses if they can't make up that funding. And so I will be watching to see what Senator Murkowski does, that she reluctantly, voted for the big quote unquote beautiful bill. We called it the ugly bill here.
Which is still the stupidest name for a bill I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, time will tell, right? They have basically 2 days now to get it done. The other point of contention is a program that was launched by President Bush called PEPFAR, and it is a PEPFAR, and that is a global AIDS prevention program. And there's about $400 million of funding at stake. And so Republicans are trying to negotiate to reduce the funding clawbacks from $9.4 billion to $9 billion, right? And that includes a few million that is for those rural public media stations and PEPFAR. And then there's a number of other amendments that they're trying to make. They're trying to do some weird stuff by like shifting money from the Green New Deal funding that was also had already been approved by Congress and put that into this like public media fund. And that's what I said, like, this is where we have to really figure out, like, how is the government allowed to do this? Like, some people are saying, like, I don't think that's legal. They're saying the, OMB, the Office of, like,
Management and Budget,
right, is saying it's okay. We don't know. This very likely could wind up in court. So we'll see. But the short story is we'll find out on Friday if this rescission, they vote on it. They'll have what's called a vote-a-rama. This is like where they're delaying. They're trying to negotiate. And yes, by Friday, we'll know whether or not they're going to be cutting the Corporation for Public Broadcasting funding and a lot of that U.S. aid funding, which is much larger than the CPB funding. And if it doesn't happen, it'll be a victory, right, for public media, who's been organizing and advocating and getting people to call their senators for this. If it does go through, which it very well might go through, because we've seen a lot of reluctancy around the other bill, and yet people still voted for it. And then there's also, we've seen senators and Congress people not even read the bill and vote for it too.
And then they find out later, oh, I didn't mean to vote for that.
Right,
Gee,
like,
you think?
I didn't know that was like going to happen. So time will tell. We'll have up. We've been following this story, for several months now, ever since the White House made that announcement they intend to defund public media. And if it does happen, public media stations will have to fundamentally restructure the way that they bring in income, because it is a significant loss. Here locally at WHYY, it makes up around 10 to 12% of the budget, mostly goes to television. A lot of these, they're called CSG grants, community service grants, I think, go for educational children's television. So that's really what they're defunding here. And it also funds a lot of emergency broadcast equipment and emergency broadcast alert systems. And so I don't see how that is a partisan thing, in this narrative. They certainly never mention it when, like, the President Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene and others who are looking to defund public media, they never mention the emergency alert part of it. It's not one of the reasons, but it certainly will see one of the greatest impacts.
And what kind of gets me with that is that the very people who they claim to champion so much, the poor and the working class, are the people who are going to be hurt the most by this. And it's going to be in places like you mentioned, Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, all of those places that probably don't have a whole lot of people that look like me living out there. So it's really kind of crazy to me that you can look at this and know it's going to hurt your constituency and vote on it anyway. And I really don't understand why Congress has decided, okay, we are going to give away our legislative function. We've appropriated this money. We know where it's supposed to go, but we're going to let you bully us into not following the law that we already passed. I don't understand. Congress has been giving up its function in the government to this president for years now, and I just don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I just want to read this one quote that really sums that up. And this is from an article in Punchbowl, and it's from Representative Eric Burleson. He's a congressman from, I believe, Missouri. MO, that's Missouri, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said, "I probably won't vote against it, but I'll probably complain about it." Yeah, and that's where we're at right now. So we'll see what happens, and we'll have an update for you next week.
All right, Vanessa, thank you so much. Now, Denise, you wrote about the strike settlements in today's newsletter, and your cake wasn't exactly thrilled.
Well, here's the thing. Don't say that a group of people is your people when you're doing these people wrong. If you're not going to do better by your people, then what are the people who are not your people? What can they expect from you? And this comes from an article that Mayor Sherelle Parker did with the Philadelphia Inquirer. She interviewed with them because, of course, she ain't going to come on here. And she said that the reason why District Council 33 understood why she was playing hardball with them was because they were her people. And the reason why that made me angry enough to write about it was the fact that sometimes when I'm walking through city council and city hall and I'm talking to the people there, these are folks who came from working class or poor roots. These are people who know what it's like to have to rely on food stamps. These are people who grew up, hard scrabble and had to figure out how they were going to make their way in the world. They had parents. My parents were, my mom and I come from a long line of tobacco farmers. My dad's parents were laborers. My mom's parents were tobacco farmers. We're working class. I came from a working class / military neighborhood in New Jersey that's in one of the poorest counties in the state of New Jersey, Burlington County. So I know what I'm talking about when I say that when you tell the poorest union of city workers, a group of people that do the jobs that nobody wants, that it's okay not to pay them squat because they're your people. I'm like, this is how you treat your people. I don't want to see how you do anybody else. Like, I was listening to the news conference today because, District Council 47 settled. And these are mostly administrative workers and stuff. And I'm glad they got the contract they wanted or something close to it. But the thing is, they weren't the poorest union. And the fact that these folks at District Council 33 have gotten a contract which they are currently voting on that is not going to change anything at all about their status as the poorest union in the city. And then you're going to sit there and say, well, they understand why I did this because these are my people. That doesn't make sense, especially when you couch it in the concept of fiscal responsibility. Because let's keep it real. When you walk into Philadelphia City Council and ask for, in 2 budget cycles, a total of $900 million, and the people that you send to defend this ask cannot answer any of the questions that City Council has about how they're going to use that money, please don't talk about fiscal responsibility to me. Because if I were to ask anybody for $900 million, I would come in with a plan of exactly what I'm going to do with that money, especially if it's taxpayer money, because you're asking a lot of the poorest big city in America if you don't do that.
And let's not forget the tax cuts.
Right. I mean, and then you add that on top of it. And I'm like, are you serious now? And I try really hard because there were some things that were said about Mayor Parker during the strike that were just plain old wrong. Like, you don't need to criticize her talking about how she looks. You don't have to criticize her talking about, her race or anything like that. There are too many other things that you can use to criticize her that have nothing to do with either of those things. And one of the things that made me, angry about that was I was being asked to defend someone who has been really disrespectful to me in the past because of that. And then on top of it, you have this thing where you're saying, well, I'm doing this for my people. And I'm like, no, if this is how you treat your people, then leave your people alone and go find some new people. Or obviously you have found some new people and they don't look like the people who pick up the trash or deal with the dead bodies that sometimes wind up in the street when there's been a shooting or any of those things. So I was like, just spare me the nonsense. And like I said, I normally probably wouldn't have written about that, but I was just so angry saying, someone saying these are my people and couching it in a fiscal responsibility lens when you haven't done anything fiscally responsible your entire term.
Well, and when you're talking about these are my people,
Mhm.
they're the people who are sort of the backbone of the Clean and Green initiative.
Yeah.
And, you're not going to bring them above,
Exactly. These people are still going to have to apply for EBT cards, which may or may not work because you have the federal government and this big, beautiful, stupidly named bill that just passed, and the state budget is 2 weeks late. And they're still trying to figure out whether or not that's going to include money for food insecurity or hunger, as I like to call it, or public transit, which is going to make a lot of this situation worse. Because if you can't get to work, you really can't buy food. So, I think that just what angered me the most is that, I understand that there's fiscal responsibility that you have to have as a member of city government. You have to make sure that the city doesn't go broke. But it would really be nice if you didn't forget where you came from in the process. And it goes back to what I say about city government all the time. That is what happens when you have too many Penn grads in one building. Y'all need some Temple grads, you need some LaSalle grads, some CCP grads, something that will keep all of you Ivy Leaguers honest, because you're not honest right now.
And just to follow up, it's really, for me, very upsetting when I hear the mayor talk about, looking out for her people. She didn't look out for them when the SEPTA board voted to first cut the city transit division and 6 months later do something about the regional rail. She didn't look out for them when the SEPTA boards decided they were going to do away with 45% of the bus service, that they were going to cut an additional 20%. She didn't look out for them when the water department asked for a rate increase, and the water rate board, which she controls, just voted today at 3 o'clock for an 18.23% rate increase. So on the one hand, she says, well, we're giving them, the workers, a 3% increase. On the other hand, she's taking all of it back, and she's taking all of it back by allowing SEPTA to raise fares by 21%, so that SEPTA will now have the highest fares in the nation, and to allow the water rate board to go ahead and raise rates by 18.23%. So now there is competition between the electric bill and the water bill. And the upsetting part is it's not necessary. We know that they could have done many things to avoid the SEPTA fare hikes and the service cuts. And I want to report a little bit on what happened at the water rate board today, because at 3 o'clock, there was almost nobody in the room. The so-called public advocate who works for the rate board itself didn't bother to show up. There was nobody there. So they use Zoom. They don't bother to show up in person, because if you show up in person, people can actually complain to you. If it's done through Zoom, well, then people just get cut off. So today, the rate board voted to accept the public advocates and the water department's proposal. And here's what's happened. The water department always asks for more money than what they need. And we know that because when they get the rate increase that they say is less than what they asked for, they don't make any changes. They don't have to do anything. There's no operational changes. And that's because they didn't expect to get everything they asked for. They knew what they wanted, and they got what they wanted, and they get it because the rate board's public advocate supports it. The rate board's public advocate advocated for giving the 18.23% rate increase. I'm going to say that again because I didn't get so upset. I didn't get it out quite right. The Philadelphia Water and Sewer Board hires community legal services to serve as the public advocate. The public advocate has no clients, doesn't represent poor people, doesn't represent working people, doesn't represent community groups. It only represents the water rate board. The water rate board instructs the public advocate to meet privately with the water department and negotiate a settlement. And that settlement is for millions of dollars more than what the experts say is needed. And the end result is an 18.23% water rate increase. Again, 3% wage increase. District Council 47 didn't even get 3%. And the mayor water rate board gives the water department an 18.23% rate increase. Now, I did get a chance to ask the chair of the water rate board who judges how well the public advocate does. And I'd like to play that video because I find it so upsetting that it's sometimes hard for me to find the words. We could get that up. My name is Lance Haver. I have two questions. Where can I find the rate board's evaluation of the public advocate?
I don't believe there is a formal evaluation of the public advocate. We certainly review his work, and at least speaking for myself, I can say that it's been excellent.
I understand your position. You're a big supporter, but I'm asking you specifically, what criteria do you use? And you're saying there is no written report, there are no criteria, just your judgment. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of any formal written requirement for evaluation of the public advocate's work.
My second question is, how will the rate board seek the public's opinion on how good or poor a job its public advocate provided in this last rate increase?
The public is free to submit comments to the board. I don't know how. We have not frankly heard any complaints other than from you, I believe. believe in a schedule S that I'm aware of.
Right. Are you doing outreach to any of the registered community organizations to see what they think?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Are you doing outreach to any of the civic organizations or advocacy organizations to see what they think?
No.
Are you doing outreach to any of the elected officials to see what they think?
No, but I certainly have, if public officials were concerned about the public advocate, they certainly know where to reach us.
But I just want to make sure on the record, you're telling me that you do no outreach to the community groups, no outreach to the civic groups, no outreach to the advocacy groups, and no outreach to the elected officials in deciding what the public thinks of the role that you have hired CLS to perform. Is that correct?
That's correct.
How do you justify that? If you call them the public advocate and you don't ask the public what they think of the job that the public advocate is doing, how do you justify that?
Under the ordinance, I'm not sure that the public advocate is required, but under our regulations, we require that there be a public advocate. And I think it's a great service to customers that we do that.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking how you justify deciding that they represent the public. You've made it clear that they don't legally represent the public. You've made it clear that they don't have to have a client group. So I'm asking you, how do you justify not bothering to ask the public what they think?
I don't think there's any requirement that we do a survey of how the public advocate is doing. They do represent the interests of the small customers.
And how do you know that? How do you know that if you don't bother to ask people what they think?
This is a very technical process, and
if you have to pay a higher bill, it's not so technical. If you're one of the DC 33 members who just got a 3% increase and is now being forced to pay an 18% increase in their water bills, it's not a technical matter. The fact that you're a former water commissioner and you get to sit here and try and obfuscate the facts is amazing to me. You don't even disclose who you are and what you've been. So there we have it. That's the chair of the water board saying, yes, I hire the public advocate. Yes, the public advocate meets. Now they say the word secret's the inappropriate word. They say, I am wrong when I use that. They meet in private. It's not secret. They meet behind closed doors, but that's not secret. Once they make an agreement, part of the agreement is that Community Legal Services gets additional work. So not only do ratepayers have to pay more than what the experts say they should pay, CLS gets additional contracts to do more work, and that's part of the agreement.
And these are no bid contracts.
That's exactly right. These are no bid contracts.
And we found the paperwork on the last one, it was $350,000.
Yes. And that's also part of it. During the hearings and during the proceedings, I asked if they were going to make public the contracts for the public advocate and the contracts for the hearing examiner. Now remember, the hearing examiner and the public advocate get hired year after year after year after year. And the reason for that's very simple. They do exactly what the rate board wants them to do. They go behind closed doors, they make an agreement, they don't tell anyone about the agreement, and then they raise rates. Water rates have gone up by 40%, 40%. And it's not that hard to understand if they combine services with the other municipal utility, Philadelphia Gas Works, that there'd be a tremendous savings. It's not that hard to understand if they went and had a management audit done, that there would be savings. If they hired consultants, instead of to argue for rate increases, to look for ways to save money, that would save money. And one of the things people don't recognize is one of the great assets the city of Philadelphia has is plentiful water. Now, we don't tend to think of it, but once you start thinking about industry's need for the use of water, one of the limiting parts of being in the Southwest or in the Southeast is the aquifers are going dry. We're very fortunate to have a tremendous water supply here in Philadelphia, and we have the ability to use much more water than what we're currently using. We have the right to take it out of the river, and we have the infrastructure to bring it in. So you would think, one would think, a rational person would think that the Philadelphia Water Department would be recruiting industries that are water intensive, breweries, distillers, bottlers, and that they would hold out for good, sustaining jobs, union jobs that pay a living wage, that give people an ability to have a middle-class life. The number of job recruiters that the Philadelphia Water Department has, the number of people they use to try and find businesses that they can bring into the city to operate is zero. The number of people they have trying to find more cost-effective ways to buy supplies or to buy supplies from local Philadelphia companies is zero. These are all things that the mayor walks away from, that city council is walking away from, and that community legal services supports. I want to just make one last point. Here's what happens. The water department asks for more money than what they want. They hold public hearings. People show up and say, no, don't do it. They go behind the closed doors and they reach an agreement, but they won't publicize the agreement. Anyone who showed up at the public hearing doesn't know that an agreement was reached. You have to be a participant, which is what I do, or you have to go to their webpage and manage to get your way through it every day to find out that there is an agreement made. And when I challenged them on that, and I said, well, shouldn't you tell people who showed up, who wanted to be part of the system, who wanted to participate, shouldn't you tell them that an agreement was made? The hearing examiner ruled against me and said, there is no legal or regulatory mandate for an additional round of public input hearings when a settlement has been reached. It has long been established and understood that settlement discussion should be confidential and not discoverable.
So none of that is covered by the Sunshine Act, despite the fact it's public funding being used to pay for it?
They are saying that the meeting to vote on the decision is covered, but the community legal services getting in the back room with the water department and deciding on the size of the rate increase is not covered by the Sunshine Act. I did raise that challenge. I was told I was wrong, and that's where we stand. And we will continue to see rate increase after rate increase after rate increase until Philadelphia City Council decides it's interested, because the mayor has made it clear. She's only interested in fiscal responsibility when it comes to limiting the wages of workers. She's not interested in fiscal responsibility when it comes to the water utility or when it comes to SEPTA or when it comes to PGW, the Philadelphia Gas Works. And that's the situation that we face.
So what can people who find themselves looking at their water bills and screaming, what can they do? Is there an appeals process for them?
In September, the bills are going to go up. If everyone who opens their bill says something, that would be remarkable. If 2% of them who opened their bills looked at it and said, this is wrong, contacted their city council person, that would put an end to it. You know, we hear from city council people that they're concerned, but there is no action. The only person who actually shows up is the majority leader, Kathleen Gilmore Richardson. She actually shows up, but the rate board won't tell her even that they've reached a settlement. So she doesn't know until today the size of the rate increase. And I believe she'll be upset, but at that point, it's too late.
And this is the same discussion we've been having for years on this show. This is the way it always goes. And nothing has changed, and CLS keeps getting this contract without having to bid on it.
That's right.
So the whole system is sort of rigged in this direction.
I think rigged is a kind word.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So that's all we got for tonight. Next week, we're going to debut a new segment that we've been working on, which is going to be taking a deep dive into some city departments. We're going to start with the Service Design Studio, a department that not a lot of people know about, which is going to be really interesting. And it's a good way to start because it's what they do is pretty unique. So we'll have that next week here on Hall Monitor.